Thank you, Gary, for the nice introduction and everybody for having me this evening. My name is Jason Singhurst. I'm a botanist and plant community ecologist for the Non-Game Rare Species Program at Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. This evening I'm going to be talking about the characteristic flora of the Fayette Prairie and some associated plant communities that occur in this subregion of Texas. I'm going to start out with sort of a broad overview of where this particular landscape or subregion of Texas persists in relationship to the Great Plains, and then specifically talk about the Fayette Prairie systems and some of the plant communities that are associated with it. So this is going to be like that movie series of Fast and Furious. Everybody buckle in. I've got a lot of slides to cover in the next 40 minutes, and I hope you really enjoy it. Thanks again. At the time of European settlement, 360 million acres of short, tall, and mixed grass prairies covered the mid-continent from Canada to Mexico. Today, these native grasslands have been plowed and paved and drained, and only 70 million acres remain. In Iowa, only 30,000 acres remain of the 23 million acres found in 1780. Only 3% of the 167 million acres of tallgrass prairie remain intact, and Fayette Prairie region is part of that, remaining 3%. The term grassland gives an impression that these habitats are monotonous carpets of cookie-cutter plants, but nothing can be farther from the truth. Grasslands come in a rich array of types, of which these host its own plant community and a assemblage of plants and animals. Texas is blessed with an amazing array of grassland systems. Today we're going to talk about a sub-region of the Blackland Prairie ecoregion, an area right in here in the LaGrange and Brenham, Texas area called the Fayette Prairie. This map represents the 95 counties of tallgrass prairie that currently or historically occurred in Texas. From 2006 through 2013, our program funded a project in partnership with the Native Prairie Association of Texas to map as a snapshot the remaining tallgrass that occurs throughout these tallgrass prairie counties in Texas. The principal investigators that mapped these prairie remnants drove county roads primarily with some access to private lands and conducted a field survey of these prairie remnants. This is an example of one in Colorado County within the Fayette Prairie region. This is the prairie that they mapped, one of many in Colorado County during this assessment. This map represents a subset of the Blackland Prairie subregions that were mapped during the study. The larger polygon represents the Blackland Prairie. The area, just a little sliver area northwest of Brenham, Texas, is called the San Antonio Prairie. And the area where the star is the Fayette Prairie region. This map represents the two geologic formations, primarily the Fleming and Oakville sandstone formations, that are derivative of the Fayette Prairies, the gray areas. The stars represent prairie remnants included in the study from 2006 to 2013, and we've added to this data set, as you can see here, compared to the map before. These prairie remnants are included within the Texas Natural Diversity Database, so we actually have these mapped digitally in GIS, including their prairie type, quality, and condition. This is a great example of a Fayette Prairie in Fayette County. These prairies are globally rare tallgrass prairie plant communities that occur on vertisols. The landforms are level to rolling plains with soils that are typically fine textured, clay, and possess a high shrink and swell potential. Fayette Prairies are an island of the Blackland Prairie region, east and southeast of the Blackland Prairie ecoregion, that follow a southwest and northeast distribution line. Fayette Prairies begin in Lavaca County near the town of Hallettsville and head northeast through Schulenburg, Fayetteville, Brenham, and end up in Hempstead, Texas, and Waller County. Fayette Prairies, unlike the contiguous Blackland Prairie ecoregion, are surrounded by the post-Savanna ecoregion to the north, the coastal prairie to the south and southwest, the Piney Woods ecoregion to the east, and South Texas Plains to the southwest. The Fayette Prairies region also includes a finger of the Evers Plateau near the town of Schulenburg, Texas. Similar to the Fleming Prairies, inclusions of Catahoula sandstone barrens and outcrops, Oakville sandstone, and local gravel deposits are infrequently encountered in Fayette Prairies. Consequently, Fayette Prairies have touristic influences from these geologic and associated soil occlusions and adjacent ecoregions. Fayette Prairies historically contained 1.5 million hectare, roughly 3.7 million acres of native grassland. Fayette Prairies are dominated by the next four plant species: They include 3 of the big 5 tallgrass prairie grasses, which include little bluestem, Indian grass, big bluestem, also known as turkeyfoot. You can see here where it gets its name, 3 grass features that look like a turkey's foot, and prairie bishop. Secondary grasses include our state grass, Cytus grama, Texas wintergrass, also known as speargrass, and is well noted for this amazing long awn that you can throw the seeds that get pierced into your friend's shirt on a field trip. Canada wild rye, tall drop seed, and Carolina joint tail grass. Associated flora that is very characteristic of Fayette Prairies include Maximilian sunflower, an amazing member of the sunflower family that can be very prolific in the fall. Cuss blazing star also can be a showstopper, another beautiful member of the sunflower family. A couple of really unique members of the legume or pea family include the showy white prairie clover and compacted prairie clover that can be infrequent to prolific actually in these prairies depending on quality and condition. Topeka purple coneflower is found in Fayette Prairie remnants, and check out its really short ray flowers, very diagnostic of the species. I'll talk about this species a little bit later. And the rough stem roseweed, a really unique member of the sunflower family. A member of the madder family, prairie bluets. Another neat member of the sunflower family, the heath aster. Another neat member of the sunflower family, false boncet. Trailing ratney is one of my favorite prairie species that can be found in the Fayette Prairie region. It's called trailing ratney because the stems trail across the ground and have these really unique maroon flowers. And then pointed phlox. I want you to come away with this slide is look at the global range, primarily Texas and Oklahoma. So this is a really unique feature of the phlox family that occurs in Fayette Prairies. Wine cup. Also purple Indian paintbrush, which comes in a number of different color forms from kind of Aggie maroon to pink. Okay, my wife's an Aggie, so I gotta throw that in there. Also cream colored, so different color forms with this species, pretty complex, very interesting paintbrush group. I also want you to note too in the map distribution in the upper right, this is again another primarily Texas and Oklahoma paintbrush species. And you'll see there's a couple of counties, kind of outliers there in the southeast. I believe that is Fayette and Washington County. I've also seen this species in Colorado County as well as Austin County in Fayette Prairies. Pitcher sage is a very showy member of the mint family, genus Salvia, that can be found in Fayette Prairies. The rattlesnake master is an amazing prairie showstopper. The fruits to me and flowers remind me of a pineapple as opposed to the flowering and fruiting structures of the carrot family. Foxglove is an extraordinary member of the figwort family with these amazing pink to purple tubular flowers. 2 of the milkweed species that are very characteristic of Fayette Prairies include the green milkweed as well as the world milkweed. A really unique member of the borage family is the false cromwell. This plant species can be found infrequently in Fayette Prairies and is highly attracted by a number of pollinator species. And of course, the showy bluebell is, like, to me, it's iconic of Fayette Prairies, hence how bluebell ice cream got its name, Brenham, Texas. Small flower milkfish, some folks also call these ground plums. This is a really unique member of the pea family, and here is its fruits down here, these really crazy seed pods. Texas prairie parsley is a unique member of the carrot family that can be found in Fayette Prairies. Illinois bundleflower is a unique member of the pea or legume family. Let me circle its little fruits right here. You see this. Basically, there's little stacks of pea-like structures that are all stacked onto each other like pancakes. But these are the individual seeds or keens right in here, just like in a pea pod. The Fayette Prairie region was primarily settled by German, Czech, and Dutch immigrants who first broke the prairie sod to farm, but maintained also hay meadows and native grasses for supplying cattle through the winter. This resulted in a multi-generation practice that has allowed for many prairie remnants to persist in this region today. However, after more than a century of cultivation of the Fayette Prairies, areas and decades of fire suppression, Fayette Prairie remnants are giving away to improved pastures and invasion by woody plants like eastern red cedar, huisache, Yopon holly, and to a less extent mesquite. These woody trees have invaded Fayette Prairies, creating thick brush, pushing out the native grasses and reducing annual and perennial plant diversity. An additional important threat to Fayette Prairies is the spread of non-native grasses, especially our old world blue stems. Fragmentation of Fayette Prairie by urbanites seeking space and beautiful views in this rolling landscape is threatening some remaining prairie remnants. Some new landowners have different values and less understanding of the Fayette Prairie's precious resources. However, a few non-traditional landowners are getting interested in these prairies, and they are seeking assistance from wildlife biologists, from Texas Parks Law Department, and agencies such as NRCS, with better management practice such as timing of haying, prescribed burning, and woody plant material. We hope that we could continue to manage and these prairies will persist. I also want to mention the two other of the big five tallgrass prairie species that can include or be present within a Fayette Prairie remnant. And these include switchgrass and eastern grammagrass. Both these species typically like a little bit moister side, swales or along lower drainage ways. Texas grama can be often found in Fayette Prairies in thin soil areas or eroded slopes. And then a really unique member of the sedge family, little two sedge, can be prolific actually in Fayette Prairies in late winter and early spring. Typically, the sedge is not more than a foot tall. It's very cryptic, but plays a huge role in the ground flora. So what are good indicator plants of a Fayette Prairie? This species is called prairie Indian plantain. And as you know, this is actually a natural or native prairie system that had been recently burned. So it can actually be a good indicator. However, if the site is grazed pretty hard, this particular species is not sought after by cattle. It also could be an indicator of a prairie remnant that's highly grazed or has been grazed for a long time. So when we're out searching for Fayette Prairie remnants in this region, we have to be careful on what species we're looking at that might actually indicate a Fayette Prairie remnant or the quality and condition of a remnant. American basket flower actually is another great example. Sometimes an area that's been grazed really hard for a few years or many years, this species can become very, very prolific and may or may not be a good sign of a prairie remnant. However, actually in natural conditions can be very prolific and be mixed in with a native remnant prairie. Now we talk about the word conservatism as far as prairie plants. These are plant species that are typically only show up in small assemblages, but are a good indicator of prairie remnants. So Barber's button, this member of the sunflower family, in my mind, is a great indicator of a Fayette Prairie remnant. If you find this particular species on a right-of-way or actually in a pasture, it's typically a good sign, and typically all of the other prairie flora are going to be commonly associated with it. Compass plant is another great, highly conservative prairie species. This particular plant species is noted for its leaves that actually follow the sun, hence the name compass plant. And this unique member of the sunflower family is only found in very few Fayette Prairie remnants. Coneflowers, to me, again, another very conservative species. If you find this species along a roadside or an old hay meadow in the Fayette Prairie region, typically this indicates a moderate to high quality prairie remnant. So why do Fayette Prairies have different appearances and flora diversity? Why is this the case? Well, One particular tract of land or prairie remnants you might come in and encounter, you go in and record, say, the overall flora of a particular site, and you show up there in the spring, summer, and fall, maybe 3 different site visits. You might find out there's different assemblages different assemblages of the grasses and annual perennial floras that show up on different soil substrates. Topography or landscape position all plays a role. That is, a high upland versus a lower drainage might have different microhabitats, again influencing the plant species that are there. Land history also plays a huge role. Has the site undergone a lot of grazing? Has it been hayed only once or twice a year? Or is it maybe haying 3 or 4 times a year? What are the things that are influencing and shaping a particular prairie site? Invasive grasses, like I mentioned earlier, or invasive native woody plant species, such as weasatch or eastern red cedar. How these invasive grasses or native invasives playing a role with respect to plant diversity. So these all these influences are happening, and they're happening dynamically, happening all the time on the landscape. And so they can be different factors that influence the rural flora diversity of a Fayette Prairie remnant. So how do you know when you're looking at this particular scene, this particular photograph, that this is a prairie and a native prairie? When we look at this particular scene, what's the first thing that catches our eyes? Of course, the bluebonnets. Beautiful, showy, one of our iconic biennial plant species that occurs in our native flora. However, for example, this particular tract of land was a site that Tim Sigmund and I visited just a couple weeks ago in Austin County. And this particular prairie remnant, or Fayette Prairie remnant, is being hayed a couple times a year. So when you come in here to survey and to record and detect and become what I call Botany CSI, come in here and try to investigate this particular prairie, one of the things we don't see here in the springtime is the warm season grasses that we see in the fall that dominate these prairies, species such as little bluestem, Indian grass, and big bluestem. If this particular site had not been hayed, they would still be present, and we still see their old floral heads and their floor structures, that is, their seed producing structures. So by haying, for example, multiple times a year, how would that influence perennial plant species? Are those perennial plant species going to be able to reproduce or not? So these are factors when we're coming into a site and we actually look at the assemblage of flora, what remains at a site, and again, it's plant diversity, and we make so those dominant species, which I introduced at the beginning of this presentation. These are all the keys and clues, again, Botany CSI. How do we investigate a site and actually know what we're really looking at? So these are just some of those factors. So this is a really exciting part of the presentation where we actually get to look at some of the prairie remnants owned by local landowners in the Fayette Prairie region. This is Brown Prairie, owned by Mark Brown, the gentleman with his arm up towards his chest, and then Tim Sigmund, our private lands biologist and program leader. Mr. Brown owns a couple hundred acres or so of different prairie types, and not just one type. He has upland vertisoil clay prairie. He has some of the Oakville sandstone, some of the rotted slope type prairie, and he also has that perched gilgai wet prairie system as well. So again, not a cookie cutter situation. He has 3 different flavors, these are all distinct different prairie types. This is showy primrose, and many of you probably are very familiar with this species and how abundant it can be along roadsides of Texas and in old pastures. But in a high quality prairie remnant such as the Brown Prairie, it actually shows up in much smaller assemblages, typically only 1 to 3% occupation in a natural prairie. In the late winter and early spring, cool season mustards appear on the Fayette Prairie landscape, and they include plants such as the spreading bladderpod. And this particular mustard species gets its unique name from the bladder, or sort of inner tube-like fruit. In early spring, we see Dakota vervain, a beautiful, showy member of the vervain family. Engelmann's daisy is a beautiful member of the sunflower family that we see frequent Fayette Prairies. A member of the acanthus family, wild petunia, starts flowering typically in April. It can flower on and off all the way through the fall. Carolina larkspur is a really unique member of the buttercup family that we see in Fayette Prairies. It gets its common name from the spur-like structure on its individual flowers. Sensitive briar is a really unique member of the pea or legume family. Its flowers remind me of one of those big showy fireworks we see at 4th of July. And then its leaves actually are what the word sensitive is referring to. That is, when you actually touch the leaf structure, they actually fold up right here at the mid-vein, like taking your hands and folding them together. Vegetative plants, like this clump of big blue stem, that's the vegetative grass on the lower photo, got Mark Brown, landowner, and Tim Sigmund and I super happy. One of the unique features about big blue stem is they actually need fire in order to help it reproduce. So anytime we find a stand of this, we're very encouraged. We hope it spreads and becomes more prolific in Fayette Prairie. Finding conservative prairie plant species discoveries are very important. Tim Sigmund found this little clump of compass plant on Mark Brown's prairie, and here's the base of the leaves. Again, like I said earlier in the program, this is a species that we find very infrequently in Fayette Prairies, but we're very excited we found this one on his property. Tim Sigmund found this really nice conservative species called Wild's Hyacinth on the Brown Prairie. We were super excited to see this species, and actually in pretty decent numbers. Golden prairie clover is a beautiful yellow flowering member of the pea family that we also infrequently find, typically in eroded shallow soil areas in Fayette Prairie. Green lily is a beautiful member of the lily family that we found a really nice population on the Brown Prairie. And here is this beautiful creamy white to white flower inflorescences. Here's a beautiful member of the sunflower family called Black-Eyed Susan. I'm always excited to see this species, and it does frequent Fayette Prairie. In the springtime, the spring lady's tresses orchid can be abound within a Fayette Prairie. White milkwort in the milkwort family, genus Polygula, is a beautiful and intricate plant species. It's typically found pretty low to the ground within the grass matrix of a Fayette Prairie. Early in the program, I'd said I would come back and talk about the Topeka purple coneflower. I want you to look at the map in the lower left. This is the entire global range, and if you see the counties in the very lower right area of Texas, that's primarily concentrated in the Fayette Prairie area. Also, I want you to look at the stem here, okay? The stem has very sparse hairs, as opposed to plant species I'm going to talk about here in a second. This is another coneflower species, Bush's coneflower. There are two varieties of Echinacea paradoxa in the United States. The first variety is variety paradoxa, and this species is primarily known to occur in northern Arkansas and south central Missouri on dolomitic limestone glades, and it's an all yellow ray-flowered Echinacea. The other variety is Bush's coneflower, variety neglecta, is known in prairie and savanna systems in south central Oklahoma. What's unique about this species is the species actually was collected in Texas in 1835 by the Scottish botanist Thomas Drummond. Drummond spent 21 months working in the area between Galveston Island and the Rivers Plateau, especially along the Brazos, Colorado, and Guadalupe rivers. His collections were the first made in Texas that was extensively distributed among museums and scientific institutions of the world. He collects 750 plant species and 150 specimens of birds, a feat that stimulated the later studies of the botanical collections of Fernald Lindenheimer, the father of botany in Texas, and also Charles Wright was influenced. Thomas Drummond hoped to make complete botanical surveys of Texas, but he died in Havana, Cuba in March of 1835. The very same year this particular species was collected by him in Texas. Now in 2017, I was lucky to encounter the species just barely over the Red River in Cook County on a private ranch northwest of Gainesville, Texas. And again, the species has not been seen in Texas in almost 200 years. Since then, my good friend Adam Black, botanist and naturalist that lives in College Station area, encountered this species just north of Columbus, Texas in Colorado County, along a right-of-way that extends onto a private tract of land. He also found a population in Washington County. And then my good friend and botanist friend, Eric Keith, found a population in western Montgomery County. And that's the county you see highlighted down here. So here's a globally rare plant species that had not been seen in Texas in almost 200 years that we rediscovered in Texas and now is known in 4 occurrences in 4 different counties. So it's it's been a pretty exciting discovery in the last few years. And this is a plant species that I hope that if any of you all encounter in the field in a remnant Fayette Prairie, please contact me ASAP. I would love to come and see the population and record the population and document it. And here's a close-up photo of the Bush's coneflower. You see how a difference is its floral head. The floral head is a kind of pine cone shaped versus sort of that kind of rounded appearance that you see, kind of button shape that you see with the Topeka coneflower. Also note its long ray flowers here are up to 2.5 to 3 inches. And also notice these pressed hairs, see if I can right here, along the main stem. So those are some of the really distinctive characters, distinguish it from the other coneflower species in the Fayette Prairie region. This is the Levee Prairie in Austin County that 10 Segment Parks and Wildlife and I just recently visited. This is Shelby Levee, the landowner, that was very gracious to have us out. There were an amazing array of wildflowers on display on our property. They included the firewheel, slender leaf fleabane, prairie spiderwort, prairie rose, yes, one of our distinctive native roses. Berlander's flax was very prolific. Yellow puff was also present at the Levee Prairie, a member similar to the sensitive briar. Texas yellow star is a really unique member of the sunflower family. If you'll notice in the range map in the lower left, this species is primarily confined to Texas, and the genus Lindheimer is named after Fernald Lindheimer, German naturalist and editor and writer, who him and his family lived in the Brussels area in the 1830s and 1840s. He contributed to collecting a lot of the flora of Texas early on, and those plant specimens went back to herbarium and museums, to universities in the eastern U.S. Drummond's onion can also be frequently found in Fayette Prairie. Texas Indian paintbrush. One of the things I want you to come away with the differences between this and the purple paintbrush we saw earlier is the very distinct linear leaves of this species right here. Okay, as opposed to purpurea, which has trilobe or 3-lobe leaves. Very didactic between the two species. Green thread is a really unique member of the sunflower family. It gets its name from the very narrow leaves. I don't know if I could point it out here. I'm going to circle down here. It's because these sort of thread-like leaves that are typically 2 to 3 millimeters in width. Hence the name filifolium or filamus-like, or very narrow-leaved. Velvety gar is a beautiful member of the primrose family that can be found often in Fayette Prairies. Drummond's skullcap is a very showy member of the mint family with its beautiful blue to lilac flowers. Star milkvine is a beautiful member of the milkweed family. Has these extremely hairy leaves, and Bar Flora has these 5-petal, sort of fused 5-petal flowers that are star-shaped, or sea urchin or starfish-like. Berlander's sundrop is a really cool clump-forming member of the primrose family. We can typically see this one on eroded slopes within the Fayette Prairie region. This is just one species of many blue-eye grass species can be found in Fayette Prairies. A beautiful member of the iris family. Carolina woolly white is a very unique, multiple-branched member of the sunflower family. Unlike plants that have, we call, ray flowers, like you see on a sunflower, this plant only has disc flowers. Silkia volvulus is a really unique member of the morning glory family. It gets its common name for the silky hairs that you see here along the stem, as well as the white silky areas along the outer margins of the leaves. It's a very cryptic species in the morularia family, often found very low to the ground. Meadow pink is one of the showiest members of the gentian family that can be found in these prairie systems. The prairie nymph is a very unique member of the iris family. One of the unique features is when you're out in the field in a prairie remnant early in the morning to mid-morning, is one of the cool things is very diagnostic is watching its petals unfold right here. Very neat. River Sean's false pennyroyal is a very aromatic member of the mint family. When he crushes leaves, it smells lemon-like. And once you note again, the map distribution of this near-range species is primarily confined to Texas and a little bit of Oklahoma, another unique feature of the Fayette Prairie. The scarlet pea has these amazing sort of brownish red flowers. It's an amazing and very showy member of the pea family. Again, look at the map range in the map on the lower right. The species does not have a very big global map. Again, another keystone species in the Fayette Prairie. I've included a few summer flora plant species that we find in Fayette Prairies. Of course, they include the showy prairie gentian or bluebell once again. The lemon bee balm, very aromatic member of the mint family. Green comet, a really unique member of the milkweed family that is primarily blooms in June and July. Hooker syringa is a really extraordinary member of the carrot family. Check out those real intricate flowers. Schinner sunflower is a globally rare member of the sunflower family. First, I want to look at the range map. At first, it looks like this as a species level is quite abundant in the eastern U.S. But this particular subspecies plantagineus, is actually only confined to Texas and Louisiana right in here. Was very diagnostic about the leaves you see in this prairie slope. Is this particular sunflower species has opposite and alternate leaves that are very thick and leathery. See the leaves here, here, and here. Very diagnostic of this rare plant species. Typically likes eroded slopes, and these are its basal leaves and the old flowering stalks. So this is a spring photo. And this is a fall photo. This particular species blooms in August, September, up through early October. Typically again on eroded. I've included a few photos of the fall flora of the brown prairie in Fayette County. One thing you notice in this photo is the composite or yellow flower member of the sunflower family scattered across the landscape. The plant in the previous photo that was scattered across the prairie is stiff goldenrod. It gets its common name from the stiff stem right here. And another unique feature of this particular goldenrod species is its scabrous or very scratchy surface of the upper leaves. Another unique grass that can actually play a pretty prominent role as far as the assemblage of the grass matrix in the fall of Fayette Prairie is Flora paspalum floridanum. And these are its keen fruits that you see here along the panicle right here. They're typically right here. I'm going to circle this, kind of around like this. And this particular grass species can be a meter up to 2 meters in height. So one of the taller grass species you'll see in a Fayette Prairie. Several false foxglove species can flower in the fall in Fayette Prairies. These are hemiparasitic plants that can attach themselves to composites and grasses. Rosy palafox is a very intricate and very delicate member of the sunflower family found in these prairies. Slender Lady's Tresses orchid is a beautiful fall blooming orchid found in Fayette Prairies. And the last orchid species we typically see in Fayette Prairies is nodding Lady Tresses orchid, typically flowering in very late October, sometimes up to Thanksgiving or even early December. Long-leaved wild buckwheat is a beautiful member of the buckwheat family we infrequently encounter in Fayette Prairies in the fall. The fall obedient plant, unlike some of the other spring flowering obedient plants, only blooms in the fall. This particular subspecies of Physocesia virginiana, subspecies primorsa, only blooms in the fall and is unique to some of the Fayette Prairie remnants. Also in the fall, a big monarch butterfly species is Isotes milkweed. This one starts flowering in late summer in August and will flower all the way to end of October. False scar is a really unique member of the primrose family. The species can be 2 to 3 meters in height, very delicate, thin structured member of the primrose family with these beautiful showy white flowers. As I wind down towards the tail end of this program, I want to leave y'all with a few really unique plant communities that coexist with the Fayette Prairies, that is, they interact with or adjacent to. The first one is the post oak claypan savanna. These particular post oak dominated sites with little blue stem dominated openings have thin sand over clay, and they're called clay pans because they have perched water tables where water actually is perched in late winter, early spring, as well as in late summer and early fall. And they're home to several globally and endemic, that is narrow range, found nowhere else but Texas, restricted plants. This is Texas meadow, which is mostly restricted to post oak claypan savannas. It is an extremely delicate member of the buttercup family that comes out in the cool season time of the year, starts vegetating in late January and early February, starts flowering towards the end of February through the month of March, and it's typically very low growing. It's found in a mix of sedges and grasses, very low to the ground. This is an entire global range in the map in the lower right. These are the fruits of the Texas meadow. The meadow actually has a male and female flower, and this is the female producing these zucchini fruits. This is branched gayfeather, a highly restricted endemic plant species, primarily found restricted to the post oak claypan savannas. If you look here in the lower left map, that's this entire global range, pretty much overlapping with most of the Fayette Prairie counties. It also can occur on sandstone glades as well. This is its inflorescence, hence the name branched. Unlike the terminal sort of single stem members of the genus Lytris or gayfeathers, this one actually has a branched inflorescence. Very unique diagnostic for the species. We're also hoping to find other additional locations, so if anybody encounters the species, please let me know. This is yellow hedge hyssop, a beautiful little delicate member of the figwort family that can be found in the Fayette Prairie region, restricted to post oak claypan savannas. You can see this is entire global range. The species typically flowers in the month of March through early April, and we're looking for additional records of this restricted plant species. Post oak and live oak dominated sandhills are another unique plant community that we're highly interested in the Fayette Prairie region. These sandhills can occur on upland ridges as well as stream terraces. These are secondary terraces above smaller creeks and river systems. Brown seed paspalum is one of the key components of these sandier sites that are often co-occur with little blue stem and grass and some other grasses in these sandhills. Old plainsman is a beautiful member of the sunflower family. It can be really prolific in these sandhills, very diagnostic of these sandier substrates. Bull nettle is another characteristic plant species found in these sandhills. It's a really unique member of the spurge family. It has these beautiful white flowers that are actually very aromatic. But what it's really noted for is its stinging hairs that often hit our ankles and have us screaming and crying home to mama. Drummond's phlox is a very showy plant species we find in these sandhills. This is the all light blue sandyland bluebonnet. Look at the range map in the upper left. This particular bluebonnet species is primarily restricted to Texas and a little bit of western Louisiana, and can be found to be infrequent, to be actually very abundant in these sandhills. This plant species could be almost 2 feet in height. Very showy. This is Brazos mint, a beautiful and extremely showy member of the mint family that can be found in sandhills in the Fayette Prairie region. It's in the genus Brazoria. This particular genus actually is restricted to Texas, and there's 3 species, and all 3 of them are narrow endemics. Look at the range map in the lower left. This is entire global range in Texas. Large clammy weed. Look at the map in the lower left. Also another narrow range sandhill species can be found in these sandhill sites and terraces and ridges in the Fayette Prairie. Coral bean is a really showy member of the pea or lagoon family that can be found in these sandhills and attracts a whole suite of pollinators. This is cucumber sunflower, which can be found very abundant in sandhills. It gets its common name, cucumber, because of the leaves that you see here at the lower base look like cucumber leaves. Loose flower penstemon also can be present in these sandhills. Beautiful member of the figwort family. And the pink-scaled gayfeather, Lytris elegans. And there's two varieties. There's the variety in the lower left, variety elegans, which is a little more widespread globally. But the white flower one, variety Bridgei, known as Bridges gayfeather, is a Texas endemic found in these sandhill communities. Seepage swales in sandhills. These are micro-wetland habitats that occur between sandhills that can be found in the Fayette Prairie region. This is a seepage swale between two sandhills, and you can see it draining off in the far distance. One of the unique plant species that's found on the outer edge, is very characteristic of these swales, is wax myrtle. This is a little spring run outlet of a seepage swale between two sandhills. This is a sundew, a carnivorous plant that can be very common in these seepage swales. The sundew gets its name for the sticky leaf pads right here that actually have dew or water droplets at the end of these kind of glandular hairs. And of course, microinvertebrates are attracted to get the dew, but unfortunately get stuck on the leafy pads, and then the plant absorbs the nutrients out of the insect, and all you're left is a dead skeleton of an insect. Common gold star can be found very abundantly in these seepage swales, and this is a very beautiful member of the Amaryllis family. Beak rushes are one of the dominant plant species occurring in these seepage swales, and they're a member of the sedge family. And one of the key characters that distinguish it from other sedges is this beak-like structure, hence the name beak rush. If you look at the keen fruit in the lower left, it has a bird's beak-like structure right here. Oklahoma grass pink orchid is a globally rare orchid species that is restricted to these seepage swales in the Fayette Prairie region. We're looking for new populations of this globally rare plant. So if you encounter this beautiful orchid that flowers in March and early April in the springtime, please let us know ASAP. Thank you everybody for having me and participating in this particular presentation. I'm leaving with this one slide in question. How can we document and spread the further knowledge of rare and declining habitats in the Fayette Prairie region? These are my good friends Lan Shin, a plant person, and then Don Verser, that's lower left, and then lower right is my good friend Don Verser, who's running plants and birds. And they're two naturalists that started what's called the Prairie Hunter Volunteer Group. The two of these and a few other folks have been very instrumental in literally making relationships with folks that own prairie remnants in the Houston County area, that is Harris County and surrounding counties. And I've been on many of the excursions, and these excursions have led us to literally permit conservation, acquisition, and easements on some of the finest quality prairie remnants that remain in the upper coast of Texas. So I highly encourage the recently developed Fayette chapter of the Native Prairie Association of Texas to follow in suit and develop a similar program. And I would support this program as many field trips as I can participate in, so we can help landowners in the Fayette Prairie region gain further knowledge, and we also can gain further knowledge of the quality and condition of these globally rare plant communities. Again, I appreciate it. I'm going to step away and stop this presentation, and then I'll field questions face to face. Thanks again.